I'm sure by now everybody here has gained some knowledge on open source and development and can't wait to get it started on their journey contributing to projects. But in our enthusiasm and excitement to contribute and get a new shirt, we tend to make mistakes when trying to commit code or fail to follow certain rules while opening issues. We tend to not take into account on what the other person maintaining the code expects from our contributors, who are unknown to them and often far away. Today we have Akash Hamirwasia here, who will be giving a talk on what maintainers expect from open source contributors. Akash is a third-year student at PES University who opened his first Git repository in 2017 and has since been a regular contributor to the open source community. He has worked on more than 20 different open source projects. The crown jewel of his work, Blaze, a file-sharing P2P progressive web application, was featured as #1 product of the day on Product Hunt and is currently being hosted by DigitalOcean. Akash is a member of the Developer Students Club, ECC, and has worked with Smallcase and 23ML. He is also a Google certified mobile web specialist. Check out his work at github.com/blenderschool after this talk and do contribute to the projects if you have some good ideas. Over to you, Akash.
Uh, Thanks for the great introduction, Vamsi. Excited to be conducting this session. I'll start by presenting my screen. Okay, so can anyone confirm if my screen is visible?
Yep, it's visible.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we can start now. So hi everyone, my name is Akash, and in this session I'll be talking about what maintainers expect from new contributors, especially in this period of Hacktoberfest, where there are a ton of contributions coming to open source. So I'll mostly be talking about points that I have noticed from my side when I have maintained multiple projects, and I hope these points are helpful to you when you start working on other open source projects. So let's start by understanding first what exactly a maintainer is, because I've noticed some people don't really know who a maintainer is. So as a general sort of understanding, maintainer is the one who owns the repository. Maintainer is usually a single person if it's like a small project, but for larger projects, you can expect like a core team of members who work on the repository. And that is sort of called the maintainer team or the core team of that project. And in most cases, you can simply like figure out who the maintainer is by just like looking at the contributors of the project and finding the person who is actively contributing and managing the project. And managing the project basically means who is merging the issues, merging the pull requests and closing the issues, and so on. So let's start by first understanding how you should go about finding projects, especially in Hacktoberfest. So the best way to like find the project to work on is to actually choose projects that you think can solve your problems. Let's say you're thinking to work on a to-do list application, which is sort of a really basic example. But let's say you want to work on a to-do list application. Instead of like starting from scratch, you can actually try to find some projects which are already working on the same thing. Maybe they have like better ideas or even more features that you had never thought of. So it's a good idea to try to find those projects which align with your thoughts and try to start from there. And when you like search for projects, it is important to find the projects which use the language that you are familiar with. This might seem really straightforward, but there are situations when people get excited to contribute to a project only to find that it uses a language which they haven't used before. And that sort of adds more learning curve, because you first have to learn the language itself, get familiar with it, and then understand the project. And if the project itself is a really large one, it becomes really complicated for the first time contributor. So make sure to like apply filters when you're searching for projects on GitHub, just to search for projects which use the language that you're familiar with. The other important point to keep in mind is not all repositories are open for contributions. And people actually don't care about this point much, but I would like to stress on this so that you don't create pull requests on projects that nobody's maintaining and that won't count towards your Hacktoberfest contributions. So how to find whether a repository is open for contributors? Well, the first thing is check if there's a maintainer for the repository. If the repository hasn't been updated for like 1 year or 2 years, you can safely assume that the project is not being maintained as much, and there's probably not much interest by the maintainer to continue working on the project. So it's not really a good idea to spend your time working on it, only to realize later that you are not getting replies in your pull request and it doesn't get merged. The other important type of repositories I would say is archive of some courses. So usually many technical courses open like a Git repository which has the code associated with the project they build in the course. So that repository is maintained to be in sync with the course that they have taught. And they don't expect someone to contribute from outside just to add some code or make it better. And that breaks the sync between the project and the course. If somebody is taking the course and they find that the project which is there in the repository is something different, that'll break the whole point of the course. So these sort of repositories which are related to some course usually don't expect any contributions from outside. Now, since we are mainly talking about Hacktoberfest, it's easier to find repositories just by searching for repositories with the Hacktoberfest topic. So if you go to the link which I've shared in the slide over here, you can find all the repositories which are sort of participating in Hacktoberfest this year. And that is sort of a good place to start working with. The next point I would like to stress on is after you have found a project that you want to work on, start by reading the README and the contributing guide. So README and contributing is sort of the important documents or documents that you should go through first before you start writing code for the project. And what exactly a README is? Well, README explains exactly what a project is about. By reading the README, you get a strong idea about what the project is, what problems it's solving, and what technologies the project is using. Oftentimes, even the contributing part of the repository is put in the README in a contributing section. So you can find help about whether the repository is open to contributors and how they can go about contributing to the repository. The contributing file is the go-to guide for contributors. If you want to open a pull request in the repository, you should definitely go through the contributing file because that lists all the points that the project is expecting from contributors so that it doesn't like add on later on for the maintainer to remind you that, hey, improve this from the contributing guide and so on. So it's better that you read this at the start itself, just to keep in mind while you're coding that you should follow these guidelines. So a contributing file tells you how to set up the project for development. So it'll list down the steps, how you can fork the repository, how you can clone it, and how you can compile it and run it on your local machine. And the contributing file also lists any conventions they follow, especially for Git commits. There are repositories which have strong guidelines on how you should write the commit messages. So all those like points are mentioned in the contributing file. And it's important that you stick to these points. The next thing is check the project website if it has one. So most large projects, I would say, have a website associated with it. And if you see there is no contributing file, which is a very rare case in my opinion, go to their project website. They probably have a small section dedicated to contributors, and that is where you would find all these guidelines about how you can go about contributing to the project. And in certain cases where repositories don't have a clear README, it's either that the repository is not interested in outside contributions, or the other way to find out if the repository is interested is to just ask the project maintainers by opening an issue and asking whether this repository is open for contributors. So now that you have sort of got the idea about how you can find the project to work on, and you have read the README and contributing, the next thing that you should look for is the issue to work on. So issues are basically features or bugs that people report that need to be fixed in the project. And the next step is to find the correct issue to work on. You don't want to pick up issues that you can't solve in the remaining 7 days of Hacktoberfest. So just find the issues by first searching for issues marked as good first issues or Hacktoberfest issues. These are the issues that are marked by the maintainer as issues that a new contributor can pick up and start working on. So definitely start with good first issue or Hacktoberfest marked issues. But as a general rule, it doesn't matter. You can pick any issue and work on it. It's not that if you don't pick a Hacktoberfest labeled issue, your contribution wouldn't count or something like that. You can contribute to any issue. The next thing is check whether someone is already working on it, or if there is a pull request already opened or merged associated with that issue. So if somebody is already working on it, it's better that you let the other person work on it and you can work on some other issue. Or if there is already a pull request open, there's no point in again spending your time on creating another pull request for the same issue. You can spend your time working on something else. Now, if you find an issue which is open and you are interested to work on it, just show your interest to work on the issue by leaving a comment. This is not really something like a rule, I would say, but usually I've seen many new contributors follow this practice of commenting, I am interested to work on this and so on, just to give an indication to the maintainer that, yeah, someone is working on this, and also to other contributors who would see the issue and see that, okay, somebody is working on it, let me try working on something else. So when you leave a comment on the issue showing that you're interested, maintainers would usually reply suggesting how you can get started. Most of the times they point you to the contributing guide, which I talked about earlier. And in some cases, they also say link you to important articles that you can follow to understand how the project is structured and so on. An important thing to keep in mind is Hacktoberfest is not a race. If you don't find an issue to work on, it's not that you have to sort of open 4 issues and just create a PR for it. Try finding some other project. You will definitely find some issues to work on. The other thing is you can open your own issues, but that has a separate set of guidelines you should follow while opening an issue. So again, keep in mind it's not a race. If you don't find an issue, don't feel disheartened. Just keep trying. So now that you have found an issue to work on, the next thing is to understand how forking and syncing is important in this cycle. So it's important to fork the repository that you want to contribute to and add the original project as upstream. Now I'm sort of assuming that you're familiar with these terms, forking and adding the project as upstream and so on. This is done so that you have a reference to the original project on your local machine, and also to your to the forked repository that you have forked from the original project. Now make sure to take a pull from the upstream repository periodically. Upstream repository is the original project where many people are contributing, whereas the forked one is the one where you are only contributing. So there might be situations where the original project is way ahead of your contributions, and you need to take a pull from it just to get the latest changes. Now it is important to take a pull periodically so that you avoid merge conflicts at a later stage. If you have worked on something really big and later you take a pull and then you see there's a merge conflict, you'll have to spend more time trying to figure out, okay, how to resolve this and so on. So it's better to take a pull periodically just to keep in sync with the original project. Now it's a good time to go write some code. And remember, you can always ask for help along the way on the same issue and tagging the maintainer. Many times I've seen new contributors don't ask for help and they open a pull request, and that's when the maintainer has to go through the code and tell them some basic guidelines that, okay, you should have done this rather than that and so on. So always feel free to ask for help at any point of time whenever you get stuck. 90% of the times maintainer will guide you to the right path and tell you, okay, how you should go about doing this. So after you have added your contribution, now it's the big time to open the pull request. So before opening the pull request, I strongly suggest you to run the tests. Most projects don't really have tests, but you would find many projects, many top projects have some tests written for their project. Tests are basically, you can think of some sort of predefined situations that the project should pass. and your contribution shouldn't break those or fail those tests. So it's important that you run the tests and see if all the tests pass successfully. That's when you can go ahead and open your pull request. If the tests fail, then there's probably some changes that you have to make. Probably ask the maintainer, okay, how should I like change the code to get the tests to pass? But it's important to run the tests once at least before opening the pull request. Now, most repositories have a template for pull request, and make sure you stick to following that template. It's not something that when you open a pull request, you see the template, you delete it, and you write something and just open the pull request. No, it's not like that. Make sure to follow the template. The template is given by the maintainer so that there's a clear description about what your pull request does, what your changes do to the project, and if there are any issues that the pull request solves. Now, if in some case the pull request template is not there, then it's better to include these information at least in the description, which is including the changes that you have made, explaining the changes that you have made, and what are the issues it solves, and some screenshots of your changes. So, for example, in terms of web development, you can leave a screenshot about the changes that you have made to the website and how it was before. So that really helps the maintainers to understand how important your changes are and what does it contribute to the actual project. This is important. You should wait patiently for the maintainer to get back. Maintainers are not something like they don't work on open source full time. At least many don't, and it's something out of passion that they are working on the project. So don't sort of keep notifying them about reviewing your code. It's important that you wait patiently for the maintainer to get back. If nobody reviews your PR within 1 week, it's probably a good time to sort of tag the maintainer and ask whether this PR will be merged or not. The next part of this contribution cycle is code reviews. So once when you have opened your pull request, maintainer usually goes through the changes that you have made and leaves some code reviews. Now, when you receive some code reviews, it's the first thing to keep in mind is don't feel bad. We all make mistakes, and it's not something to be sad of when somebody leaves review for your code. So just accept the reviews and try to make changes as the maintainer has suggested. And always feel free to ask questions and get more clarity if those reviews don't make sense to you. 90% of the time, when you open a pull request that is in the direction of solving an issue, maintainer would definitely merge your code and they'll help you along the way. So if the pull request doesn't meet some guidelines, they will help you and guide you along the way to make it reach that level, and they'll 90% of the time they'll merge your code at the end. And again, as I said, don't notify the maintainer again and again to get your changes reviewed. Your changes will get reviewed after a certain period of time, and if nobody checks on your pull request, it's a good time after let's say 1 week to notify the maintainer about whether your pull request will be reviewed or not. So these are sort of the basic general guidelines which maintainers expect. Taking it to the next level, make sure you don't make spam contributions just to get the shirt. This is sort of what happened in the early days of Hacktoberfest in 2020. Many people just made spam contributions on top projects, and that sort of made Hacktoberfest itself a really bad event in the open source world. So now it has been improved. It's more strict this time. And remember to not open any spam pull requests, just changing some typo or removing a space and so on. Just don't do all these activities just to get the shirt. Open source is much more than just getting the shirt. And as I said, maintainers work on the project out of passion and don't open an issue and force it to be fixed. Since you are not the one who's working on the project actively, it doesn't really make sense for someone to open an issue and force it to be fixed. Open source is something where people come together and work on a project. So if you want an issue to be fixed, it's better that you can start working on that issue yourself. And remember to do your homework and understand what the project is about. You shouldn't start working on the project and ask for basic questions like, okay, what this project is about, and which languages does it use, and so on. All these information is available in the README and on the project website. So it's better that you read that first and then ask for any other questions that you have. And always don't leave your PR hanging. By PR, I mean pull request. And if the maintainer has left some code reviews, it's better to change those or fix those reviews and then update your pull request. Don't leave your pull request hanging, because that sort of gives an impression that you are not interested in working on the project. And that's when the maintainer sort of gives the issue to somebody else. And remember to be patient. Open source is not the job of maintainer, and they already have some other stuff to do. And open source is sort of a side project for many developers. And again, to take it to the next level, maybe continue working on the project after Hacktoberfest. So if you get like a pull request merged in the project, it's a good chance that you have learned a lot about the project along the way. You have understood what the project structure is and what languages, what conventions they use. So maybe stick around after Hacktoberfest as well and make more contributions to the project. Now, this year, I'm also maintaining two projects from my side, and I'll sort of give you a glimpse of what those two projects are in the remaining time. So, as Vamsi said in the introduction, this year I am maintaining Blaze, and Blaze is the peer-to-peer file sharing web application. And the domains which the Blaze project include are user interface, web development, and networking. So if these are the domains that interest you, Blaze is probably the really nice project to get started with. Blaze has over 850 stars on GitHub, and the project currently is being sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the same company who conducts Hacktoberfest every year. So it's a really nice feeling to have them sponsoring my project. You can read more about Blaze on the GitHub repository and try out the Blaze application on blaze.now.sh. And the other interesting project that I have open this year is Untab. Untab is the browser extension to boost your productivity. And over here, I have a small picture of Untab. You can see it's like a search bar, which allows you to search through open tabs and your history in a single interface instead of having to search through multiple tabs open in your browser. So I built this last month and I'm using it daily, and it really improves your productivity. The domains of this project include, again, user interface and web development, and also developing a browser extension. The project is fairly new, but it already has 60 plus stars on GitHub, and the project is being supported by Force United. You can check out the Git repository of Untab at github.com/winterschool/untab. So like most of the issues on these projects were open for Hacktoberfest, but now it's sort of all complete. But you keep an eye on these projects. Probably by today or by tomorrow, there will be more issues open for contributors for Hacktoberfest. So it's probably a good chance to try out working on some large projects. So thank you. I hope this session helped, and I'm looking forward to your contributions in Blaze and the Untapped project. If you want to connect with me, you can find my links over here. And if you have any questions, I think we can pick that up.
From Palvi. She's asking,
Okay,
what do you
so
mean
what?
by, yeah, what do you mean by
Yeah.
PR
So what do you
hanging?
mean by PR hanging? So what I mean by that is, let's say you have opened a pull request and a maintainer has left some reviews for the changes that you have made. And that's when the maintainer expects that you either sort of comment on their suggestions, justifying like why the changes you have made are the way you have made, or even updating your pull request so that it's in line with what the maintainer has suggested. So that's when you leave your PR hanging, that's when you have sort of left your pull request. It's just for Hacktoberfest that you have created a PR and have shifted your focus on some other project. So it's a bad impression to the maintainer, just to show that you are very focused on Hacktoberfest and not really contributing to the project. So don't leave your PR hanging. Try to get it merged as much as you can.
So I think that's about it. Thank you very much, Akash. We hope to see some contributions soon. So have a great evening, everyone, and happy coding.
Okay, thank you for having me.